It's that time. Welcome, everybody. My name is Kimmy McBurney. I think I know most of you. So lovely to see some familiar faces. Thank you all for joining us. I know we've all been really craving a conversation and some connection with our community. I know we're all kind of stuck in the same juxtaposition of navigating the disaster and how we can help, but also, surviving ourselves and navigating our businesses and whatnot. So I'm really excited to have all of our contributors here, and we're going to just get right into it. So first up, I'd like to introduce Zach Ruiz of the Ruiz Report. I'm sure you've all seen him around. If you ever have attended any of the AVL meetup, he is half of the great AVL meetup. But really, I wanted to invite him because the Ruiz Report specializes in analyzing the data of our real estate market. So I know we've had a lot of rumors like this is happening and that's happening, but I read his recent article that really just was like, well, let's look at the data and see what is actually happening with our market. So I will turn it over to Zach so he can screen share and show you guys some of the great research he's been doing. Zach.
Thank you for the intro. All right, found the desk. All right, so what we're gonna do is I wrote this article and it's decently long. It's a long read for sure. So I'm going to go through the charts and explain them, give you the insights, open it up for some questions. But if you really want to dig deep, by all means, go to this article. I'll tell you how to get there. Actually, a quick thank you. Both Seth Connolly and Matt Allen are on the call, and they reviewed it as I was kind of going through it. This is a very long article for me. I don't usually write something this long, and they both had great feedback. So wanted to thank them for that. So basically, this is a part one of a three-part series, right? So part one is we're covering what happened. And then part two, which should be done by the end of the week if all goes well, is what has been happening. And then part three will take a little bit longer. We need the dust to settle and all these listings to close out to see what was the ultimate impact. All right, so we're going to go over these 8 graphs, just kind of talk about what happened here. And by all means, jump in and ask a question if anything's unclear. So an important thing is setting the tone. As we all know, we're very much still in the process of dealing with this and grieving and all the things that need to happen. All right. So I wrote this little line here. All right. So, and I'll just read it word for word. This is how I'd like you to consider this data. All right. So the people of Western North Carolina have been showing up day in and day out to come back stronger than ever from this disaster. And at least to date, the housing market has begun showing up right alongside them. So why did I choose to include that? Because overall, the housing market has proven itself to be very resilient in the face of the storm. And we're going to look into that. And I don't want that to discount in any way, shape, or form what has been happening. The destruction has been, not evenly spread. There are some people whose lives and houses and neighborhoods look like nothing really happened, and others, their neighborhood's not even there anymore. So we have to be very sensitive of the reality of where we're at, but also there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty about the future, but you'll see to a dollar amount, absolute certainty is what happened to the active market. And that's where we'll start. So what did the market look like the day before Helene? If you go to this blog, all of these graphs are interactive. You can click through them and make them change. So if you only want to find out for Buncombe County and whatnot, that's what we'll do. A quick step back. This article features 7 counties. As it turns out, these are 7 counties that were most affected in our area by Helene. But it's also because this is Canopy MLS data. So I can only tell you about the full data sets that I have. So the caveat is not only is it just these 7 counties and not everything that happened in Helene, it's also only those homes that were on the market. So we can't tell you anything about what happened to the rest of the neighborhoods that were not for sale. But as we're all real estate professionals, we're concerned and interested in what's happening with the market. So the day before Helene, September 26th, there were a total of 3,924 homes that were either under contract or active. So homes that were on the market or available, right? And so you'll see that about 30% of them were under contract and the rest were active. And so every chart from here on out is a subset of this data. So the first step is some sellers decided they no longer wanted to sell. This is the most definite way to say that. You withdraw your listing. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a chart, and like I was saying before,
not fucking
Craig, you're not muted, my friend. So the first thing we're going to do is we're seeing that we're shades of blue here, right? We're just kind of looking like the Blue Ridge. If you can figure out how to get 7 colors to appear on a graph, send me a message, right? But I went with this because it starts looking like the mountain ranges here in a second. But you can change or include the counties if you want to get more in depth. So this is what we're looking at. This red line in all the charts is when Helene makes landfall. So I included like a week before just to show like, what does the market usually do? And so this is day by day. This is what happened on each individual day for homes that chose to completely come off the market by withdrawing. You'll see nothing was happening around then, because if you live around here, you knew you had bigger things to worry about right there. You probably couldn't get cell service, probably couldn't get to these listings. But from there, we see a steady pace of people finally deciding to withdraw their home. One of the things you'll notice is that somewhat recently, from the 16th to the 18th, we have these large spikes. And we'll get into why I think that happened. But basically, it took some time to assess what was happening. Not only physically, what happened to the neighborhood and my property and whatnot, there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty as how is Asheville going to bounce back? What is the economy going to look like? Are people still going to want to move here? And we'll see that people are changing their mind over time. So this is just daily. And then we get to our Blue Ridge graph. What did it look like over time cumulatively? So if we look at the week before, people don't generally withdraw their homes. I mean, certainly it happens, but it's not something that happens very, very frequently. But from the moment the storm hit until now, you'll see an unprecedented 194 total homes withdrawn, and there's some nuance there. That includes these listings over here, right? So that they were not affected by the storm. When we only talk about storm stuff, they're excluded. But in this graph, when you see this, it does include that leading week. And you'll see the majority of them are in Buncombe County. So this is the definitive, I have taken my home off the market. The next one is they decide to take a step back, right? So they just say, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to take it temporarily off market. Now there's some benefit there. You don't accrue days on market. There's all sorts of things. You keep the relationship with your realtor, but you also just get to take a second to breathe, figure out what's happening. So again, we'll see the same thing. The temporarily off market, this is just day by day. Because it's not as serious, right? You can come back from it or ultimately decide to withdraw. That's the nuance we'll get to here in a second. You'll see that again around the 7th, once everyone started getting cell service and everything, people started making decisions saying, hey, this is a lot more serious than we thought it was going to be. Let's take our house and just take a pause for a second. That's temporarily off market. Once again, we get to our second shade of Blue Ridge Mountains. This is the cumulative. A lot of people have decided to take a pause, it looks like, and we're going to talk about this. This graph by itself in isolation looks pretty wild, right? And so from this, we can deduce a pretty cool thing. So how much money does this mean, right? What is the economic value of the homes taken off the market as a result of Hurricane Helene, right? So this is adding, as you see here, temporarily off-market listings can and historically do return to active status. So this chart may fluctuate as time goes on, but right now it is up and to the right, as we'll see. So what I've done here is basically tracked the MLS every single day and looked at the status of those original homes that were available and saw whether they were temporarily or withdrawn on each day. If they were, then I took their list price, which I love to say is a price no one has agreed to, but it's the price we're going to use here because we need a number. Right. And so we can see the value of what's been taken off the market as a result of Helene to date. And right now, as of yesterday's data, it's $316 million, which is a pretty staggering number, right? $316 million has been removed from the market. Now there's nuance there. Some of them have been withdrawn, they're gone. Some of them are temporarily off the market, and some of them may decide to come back instead of fully withdrawing, which is why I think this number will come down, that we won't get 100% of the temporarily off market ultimately withdraw. I would find that very, very unlikely, right? So if we scroll back up and we saw this spike, I think this spike is because people who were temporarily were like, you know what, a little too uncertain for me, I'm out. I think that's what those spikes are. I don't think that they were active the whole time and then just decided 20 some odd days later that it's over. I think these are people who have made progressive decisions, but you know, we'll never know. So this is a big number, all right? This is a very big number, but we're going to put this number in perspective here in a second. So just keep that in mind, right? So putting into perspective kind of how we're doing, right? So first, let's look at the two subsets at the beginning. There were those homes that were under contract. What happened to them? You know, they always say that once you go under contract, anything that can go wrong does. This is a really, really big example of that. right? No one expected this storm to happen. So if you were under contract, everything that could have gone wrong potentially did. So how did it do overall? And this is where we can start seeing the confidence and the resilience of the market, okay? 55% of those homes are under contract still today, right? 32% of them have since closed. And you'll see here, this is the number, 8.3% are active. And what that means is for whatever reason, but generally on the buyer side, they chose to get back onto the market. JJ, if you have a question, fire away. If not, keep going. All right. So the yellow here is that they're active again, which means that deal fell through, right? So 8% of the deals fell through, 55 and 30, right? So almost 90%, close to it, right, are fine or closed. And now we've got our temporarily off market. So why did that happen? Anything from, you know, their personal situation changed to the home that they had as a contingency. There's a bunch of reasons why it might come temporarily off market, but they're in limbo. We don't know what will happen. So what we do know that happened is 2% or 22 total homes actually withdrew. And then you'll see a couple people snuck in here. 3 homes let it expire, right? Which is an interesting data point because they're under contract, but the MLS is a fun place, right? So overwhelmingly, we see that the homes that were under contract did well. They either remained under contract or they sold. So about 8% of them fell out of contract. So now this is where do we stand? And this is where we get into perspective, all right? This little pie chart here, again, all the colors are the same throughout, and you can take them out if you want to see, right? Of all the listings that were available or under contract, here's what we can see. That $315 million off the market, that is only the addition of those homes that withdrew and were temporarily off the market. So as you see here, that's 208 and 164, or 4% and 5%. So 9% of the market is, at any given point in time, it looks like, is worth $315 million, $250 million. And that's less than 10% of our market. Now, there's no straight line extrapolation. I can't times that number by 10 to get the total value of the market, but it does suggest that it's a magnitude of order larger. So in perspective, a massive staggering number was removed potentially from the market, and that number is not settled just yet, but it goes to show you the size of the overall market. Again, right, I always say if you don't like graphs, you know, I've got pretty shapes and colors. Look, if the only colors to worry about are dark gray and potentially a blue, the rest of them are doing well. They're either under contract or closed or still for sale. That gives a resounding level of confidence from the people who are on either side of that deal that they want to continue and they want to keep going forward and moving here and staying here. All right. So the good, the less good, the bad. If you don't like charts, I got numbers for you. The overwhelming majority, is in the good, right? Quick math, that's really close to 100. And so this is this. So at the bottom here, you can see you can go for the newsletter if you want. You can sign up for an account that's free and get video analysis. So if you want to learn how to interpret the graphs, you do that. But the point is, right, we did well, I think. And what's next will be part 2, where we talk about what's happened since. How many homes have gone under contract since Helene? How many new listings, which is really interesting. How many people thought it was a great time to sell the day after Helene? We'll find out hopefully by the end of the week. So if anyone has any questions, by all means, fire away. I know we started a little bit late, so I want to give everyone else as much time as possible.
I have a quick question. That cliffhanger, I can't. It's got to be next week already. I need to know. Have you been looking at the data you have through the 24th? Like, what are you seeing? What do you think it's going to look like for new listings and what's coming on market?
I think, so the reason there's like a pause in the article as well is because we need some time here, right? I think as you go to the right in the graph time-wise, if you go like this, it will be the hockey stick, right? There's going to be a pause. No one thinks it's a great idea to list their house 3 weeks ago. It wouldn't even have been possible in a lot of situations. But I think over time, we have an extremely strong and resilient market. The reason people want to be here are the mountains and quality of life and all that. And certainly that took a hit for a minute or two, but that's not going anywhere long-term. And so I definitely see us going back to the new normal, which is a positive, strong market still.
I love it. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in. No, everyone's just so overwhelmed by the fantastic data. Zach, thank you so much. Essentially, you are a private citizen just volunteering this information. So I'm so grateful for the work that you do. Without you, we wouldn't have a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of clapping here. We wouldn't have a lot of this data. So very appreciative. Sorry, I see a new message. Great stuff. Yeah. So very excited. I am actually planning another lunch in person, hopefully on November 6th. So we maybe, if you're available that day, we'd love to have you back for part 2 if it's available.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to
Yes.
move on. So that was kind of the data perspective. We're trying to kind of give all sides of it. So today I've also welcomed Jeff Stewart. I think a lot of us are familiar with him. He is the owner of many different real estate brokerage interests in Asheville. Obviously a member of Keller Williams. I watched the video the other day from one of the Keller Williams higher ups. So basically they represent almost 1,000 agents in the impacted area. So I think he was a great representative to call on to kind of just speak to the agent perspective. What are you seeing, Jeff? And then also kind of, you spoke the other day about gleaning information from previously impacted areas, the Katrinas and the Harveys and the outliers, areas that didn't have expected storm impact. So Jeff, thank you. I'll let you take it away and give us some insight.
Absolutely. And Zach, those are the most beautiful graphs I've seen. They're so good and legible. They're so good.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for doing that.
Quick plug. If anyone reads the Rees report, it's because Jeff asked me to make an absorption report a couple of years ago. So that is, this man played a big role in the data people like.
Is my internet okay? I'm kind of posted up somewhere. Is it good?
Good.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety in the market, obviously. You guys keep freezing. Is it frozen on your end or no?
You're good.
It's not freezing? Okay, it's glitching on my screen, so just stop me if I'm talking to no one. So there's a ton of anxiety in the market about what's gonna happen. I think we've been blessed to have so much interest in our area, and people flock here, right? So I use a phrase, catch or fetch. We've been the recipient of catching a lot of real estate, a strong market, and blessed to have that. So with the storm, I think we're getting a lot of anxiety. Is that still going to happen? What do I have to look for? And the predominant question is, has this happened before with storms, and what has the market done? So I reached out to research team at Keller Williams and was able to get information from that. And I want to, first of all, say we're going to be okay. Number one, we needed to make sure everybody was safe, right? We need to take care of our families and our community. And I've heard it time and time again that we've come together as a community like no one's ever seen. So I think we need to lean into that. Community is what brings people to Asheville, and we've shown that it's stronger than ever. Houses are houses, right? And the damaged ones are damaged, and the ones that are not damaged, there's going to be incredible pressure in the market and compression to find housing. So we have a lot of displaced people. So what I did was I had the research team look back at 3 previous storms. That was Katrina, Baton Rouge, and Harvey, and just say, what did those markets do, and what did that look like post-storm? And what's interesting is we took a national trend line showing just housing growth across the nation, and then just measured storm activity, what Zach's doing right now, and said, what did that do over time? What's interesting is there's 2 distinct phases. I'm going to repeat some of the stuff in the video here, but 2 distinct phases. The first one being a loss phase, and that's phase 1. And what we saw was historically that lasts anywhere from 1 to 3 months, but typically 2 to 3 months. And that's where the market's going to really recoil. And that's what Zach was saying, when people just stop. It's really your shit moment. It's when, what's going on? We need to, I'm afraid to transact. I want to know what the market's going to do. So that lasts from anywhere from 0 to 3 months, 1 to 3 months. What we see, though, is that after that recovery phase, it kind of works like a pendulum. So we have a pretty distinct swing and the pause, as we would expect. And then after that pause, the pendulum actually swings and exceeds typical growth. And I believe that's a result of a lot of the compression in the market, or that pressure with displaced housing. And we have a more limited supply, right? So supply and demand suggests that we have fewer homes, we're going to have more people interested in it, and that makes sense. Now, what we need to look at is from that loss phase, the next phase is recovery. And Katrina has kind of been an outlier on that, because most of the storms were a 3 to 4 month example of recovery after the loss phase. And Katrina actually ended up with a 9-month recovery. So it's been kind of an outlier. So I was kind of dancing around with my unicorns and sprinkling pixie dust and like, oh, it's going to happen really quickly. But I reached back out to the team after we kind of had a better assessment, and they said, I want to caution you that I do think the market's going to recover, but to have it exceed the market that it was at or to break even again, they think it's going to be a little bit longer recovery, trending a little bit closer to something toward Katrina. Because we were like, I know it's real to everybody. It hit hard, but nationally, when we look at it, we had a lot of devastation and we lost a lot of homes. And I want to actually give you some numbers on that. So one of the ones we looked at was Harvey. There was 15 to 20% of the homes were damaged. 80% of those were uninsured. 1% of the population moved out of town. So, and the way they track that is by school registrations. So when they see students show up in other states or other communities. Baton Rouge was 30% of the homes damaged. 80 to 90% of those were uninsured, and 2.5% of that population relocated. And then Katrina, 80% of the homes were damaged, 90% uninsured, and 50% of the population moved out. Now, what I don't know, and I'm interested to hear if any of you guys know, I don't know how many homes were damaged from a percentage, and I know we won't have a concrete number on that, but I'm interested to find how many homes were damaged relative to the amount of homes that we typically have. That's those things indicate to us that we're gonna have that loss phase, and then we're gonna go into recovery. And in that recovery phase, we could be anywhere from 4 probably to 6, 7 months before we see a full recovery. And what they call a full recovery, and this is like I always say that trend lines are funny because nobody knows what a trend line is until you look backwards. So part of this is we'll figure out what this looks like over time. But I'm really interested to see how quickly the market comes back and where it ends. Typically, the market will rest at about 2 to 3% under the national average as it comes out of recovery. Now, we have an extremely strong market. And Zach, where are we currently at on absorption rate prior to storm?
So the supply and demand conversation is an amazing one to have, right? So our months of inventory, kind of what we talk about, is based on a trailing 12-month, how many homes have been selling, right? But demand has exceeded supply for a very long time. And so since that's been happening, kind of what you're talking about, the compression and everything, it does suggest that so long as people continue to think this is a great place to live and we continue to provide what we have been, and I think the community angle is incredible to mention as well, that our absorption rate suggests it's a very strong market.
That's right. And correct me if I'm wrong. You study the numbers more than I do. But we typically look at a 5 to 6 months of inventory as a stable market, right? And I think we were averaging 3.5, 3, 4, something like that prior to the storm.
Yeah. So we're doing that now. And as everyone knows, for the past years, it was like 1 or less. Yeah.
Right. So we still have quite a bit more demand than we do on buyers. Now, there's so many factors that are going to play into this, but I think this is a unique opportunity for us I'm going to speak from a real estate perspective, but this is going to be edgy, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I'm good at this. Just being offensive, but a lot of us claim we're not transactional. I'm a real estate broker, but I'm not transactional. I'm different. I want to tell you that if you've ever had a moment to show up for your clients and your friends and family and your community, it's right now. And it's going to be by becoming a master of the market and interpreting the data. So when somebody like Zach puts data in front of us, it's our literally obligation to go learn those numbers and then connect people in our world and community with resources that can help them move forward as a family. This is literally our moment as real estate professionals in this market, and it will come back 10x because it's going to be people and community based and serving them. And I know that sounds really preachy, but there's a lot of fear in there. But if you lean into contribution and this market can help be a consultative agent in their world rather than a sales agent, I think we have a unique opportunity to have an incredibly recovered market and really strong businesses as agents.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I'm seeing clapping. So I appreciate that sentiment. And I think that's a really big reason I wanted to have this conversation today. Not only as real estate agents, real estate professionals, like we're just playing that balancing game of like, how do we survive, but how do we support our community? But I also drew back on our kind of our COVID experience. I remember like we were deemed essential services, like people need housing. I know probably many on this call, including ourselves, have served people who have been displaced. It's giving me chills right now, who are in need of homes. So I think that's important to shift our focus and remind ourselves, yeah, we're not being salesy. We're providing an essential service to our community, and that's really where we're going to thrive. Looking through the comments, someone asked if you were sharing your screen. You weren't, but I know the graphic you were referring to. I don't know if you shared it, Jeff, but Johnson Property Group has shared kind of a similar.
I can now if you want to see it. I can put them up.
Sure. Or I'm wondering if you have a link to drop it. I wonder if people might want to share that. If you can put it in the chat. But yeah, it's a graphic they put together with those numbers that he referenced with the damaged homes, uninsured percent that stayed. Karen mentioned that actually Buncombe County school population has been declining anyways. So we're curious how we're going to be able to kind of extrapolate the impact of the storm from, what was done. Corey said she knows the commissioner of Buncombe County said that FEMA has looked at 70% of the area. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, FEMA, it's hard to, I know because some people had like bridges down or whatnot. Like I think it's going to be hard to again extrapolate what's actually damaged homes or, irreparable homes. But yeah, I'm curious too to kind of follow along and see what the impact has been. But like Zach is mentioning, if the market's anything indicative of it, we may rest around that 8 to 9% of the homes. But again, only time will tell. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so Jeff is sharing in the chat some of those graphics. So I appreciate it. So Jeff, any other words, or if anyone has any questions for Jeff, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question. This is Jen Duke. Thank you guys for having this today. I really appreciate it. All very valuable information. Jeff, I'm curious, when you were talking about Katrina, you said 80% of the homes were damaged, and then you said 90% didn't have the insurance, and then 50% left the area. Is that correct?
50% population loss when based on census data.
So 50% population loss of homes that were damaged, or total population loss?
Total.
Okay. I appreciate that.
In New Orleans.
In New Orleans.
Yeah.
I'm from New Orleans originally. My family went through Katrina in there, and we knew that it was a lot, but I had not heard those statistics yet. So yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm curious if that feels accurate. Good, but that
I would say it feels pretty accurate. I mean, in the months past Katrina, actually, I should say more than that, in the several years past Katrina, yeah, it was just a totally different city. And I'm definitely curious as far as our area goes, considering we have so many affected counties, how that will look for us in the future, because similarly, but also different from New Orleans, we have a lot of people who lost their homes who are generationally from this area and who would never imagine themselves leaving. So I'll be really curious how that ends up working out.
And I'm interested, and I don't know if this is or later there's a format for a good discussion around this, but I think we have an opportunity to really be supportive and learn more about the demographic impact of this, because we're going to see pretty dramatic impact, I believe, on like workforce, and like we have an opportunity to help here, and I'm not sure what that looks like yet. So I encourage us as a community to have that conversation openly. But everyone had a lot of losses, but in particular, there's a lot of exposure for our low and low income members of our community. So I'm also interested in that.
Thank you, Jen, for kind of validating that. It's helpful to know. And Jamaica chimed in as well. She's also from New Orleans and said that those numbers kind of feel accurate. So it's good to know that that's kind of the feeling. Any other questions for Jeff?
I'm not sure if it's a question for Jeff only, but for the call in general, wondering if anyone's planning to talk about more kind of boots on the ground. Like, I have 2 sellers who still want to sell. Are we having those conversations, that kind of thing?
Well, I'll jump in just real quickly here. If you check out those graphs, in particular, look at the 2 white ones that are in the chat, you'll see that the baseline is what we would expect is typical, like, units sold in a market. And you'll see that that pendulum swings quite a bit above that because of that compression, or because of that pressure on the market. You always want to absolutely do a needs assessment for your sellers and find out if it makes sense for them to sell right now. And I will tell you, from a supply and demand standpoint, when you have a lot of pressure on the market and you have high demand, it's a fantastic time to put yourself in the beauty contest with the other homes. People need housing. So I think that one of the things that could harm us as an industry is if our narrative is hold on, let's see what the market does. It's not going to help anybody. I think it's consultative. And then from a data standpoint, which is great about what Zach is doing, then here are the numbers. I know if I'm reading the numbers right, Zach, I think that our showings, are you tracking showings at all?
I was wondering that too, because I have heard people are saying they're not getting showings.
Well, showings are actually they've been going up by 50%. And then this week we're already above that number. So that tells me that there's
great.
activity in the market. So that's a great thing.
If I could piggyback off of what Jeff is saying, I know I'm not on the panel here, but I have 2 listings that decided to stay active during all of this. One of them is in Maggie Valley, which they had some damage, but where the house is, they were fine, really. And the other one is in Lake Lure. But miraculously, where this house is was right before a lot of the road damage that goes around the lake. And so the house has accessibility to the Ingalls over there off of 64 and has access the back way out towards Charlotte. And in discussing this with my clients, we decided to keep the Maggie Valley on the market because, easy accessibility, there wasn't any damage, totally fine. However, the one in Lake Lure, we are going to keep it on the market, but I've been able to help them find a 6-month long rental agreement with some renters. And what we've come up with is that the renters have agreed to allow us to continue showing the property. We kind of feel like that particular property is going to take longer for showings to start happening, just because of the extreme damage in that area and the extreme infrastructure issues. But both of my listing clients were very inspired to stay on the market. And interestingly enough, this week I had 2 showings at both. So like Jeff said, I think it's kind of particular to the listing, particular to the area around the listing, and also to your client's needs. Are they able to keep it on the market without renting it, or do they need to rent it to get through the winter months or whatever the deal is? It's all very personalized to them. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. And thank you again to Jeff. I know he's got to jump in a few minutes. And we do still want to get through the other 4. Sabrina, do you go ahead?
I got a question for Jeff.
Okay.
So talking to my other professionals that are on the coast and things of that sort, they said sometimes you'll have an influx of investors who come up and want to start buying up the market and waiting, buying low to try to increase. Is anyone seeing that yet?
So we are for sure, and I can put an example in the chat, but we've created a one-sheeter that we're circulating that just says, understand the investors are here for a reason. Make sure you have an attorney that you're consulting if you're going to go under contract post-storm. It's absolutely something we need to be educating the public about, because it's the underbelly of an event like this is you will see it. And I've personally gotten calls from not ill-intended people from out of town just saying, is it too soon? And I'm like, yes, it's too soon. Like, if I can't drink my water, it's too soon.
I love that. And I love the chat. So I would implore everybody, we're going to kind of move on. I'll stay at the end if anyone wants to have any more open discussion. But thank you, Jeff. People are chiming in saying I've got one in Hendersonville, had 4 showings this week. Karuna made a good point that December, winter's a little bit slower for us anyways. So curious how we're going to kind of analyze data at the same time. But love to continue this conversation. So feel free to chime in the chat. And Jennifer, that was an awesome example of exactly like every single house is going to have a different consideration because of your buyers or your sellers or your accessibility, stuff like that. So I love that. So wanted to kind of zoom through the rest of, by my math, we each have like 3 minutes, but we're going to try and be concise. So I want to get some of the support services, like Jeff just mentioned. You need a great attorney.
Do you think you could
like
let Ruby out?
Somebody let Ruby out.
Oh,
Just wanting people like Catherine Van Meyer, if you need an attorney to consult with clients, investor clients, investor buyers, please have all those people. So without further ado, I'm going to attempt to screen share. I just have 2 very quick slides. Let's see. Share. Okay, so again, I'm Kimmy McBurney, one of the owners of Allied Home Inspection. So just coming from a home inspection perspective and obviously looking at a super small lens, we all know what a home inspection is. That's not what today's about, even though we are open for regular business. So if you do have transactions you need support with, we're always here. Please do follow us on social media if you don't already. We changed our handle. We're now Allied Home Inspector. But really because I'm using this as a source to educate clients. So the first thing we did is that second phone picture. We rolled out property assessments. This actually came as a home inspector. When the storm hit, I reached out to a home inspector support group and said, how can we help? How can we provide services? And it was an inspector from Florida who said, there's a need for these property assessments. So we have those available for clients. And I'm actually finding, we obviously had an influx right after the storm, but I'm also finding they're still relevant because of unforeseen damage. For example, we had a client who just after the storm had somebody look at their property and basically kind of gave them a thumbs up. Like, it looks fine. Like, you've got some, erosion in the back hill, but the house looks fine. We went 2 weeks later to test the water, found out the building had been red tagged by the city for structural defects and is now uninhabitable because there was a retaining wall failure, which I also think could have happened days after the storm. If things are still failing, trees are still falling. So I think it's really important to employ your clients, if they do need professional assistance, to have property assessments done. Get somebody on the roof. Just because there's not a tree resting on the roof doesn't mean a tree didn't come in contact with the roof at some point, or, moisture intrusion could have gotten in the wall, but now it's just now seeping through, molds developing, all those things. So that second photo, we did roll out just recently a storm inspection bundle. So you can do our storm inspection and get a discounted mold test and water test. And I do realize there's free resources. We share that as much as we can. I know you can pick up water testing kits and whatnot, but some people, if you kind of just want to get these things done and do have the luxury of affording these services, we've put them together and added the storm discount, and also just trying to help people in any way we can. So this graphic I shared about, are you under contract? Our licensing board did let us know we are able to provide letters if we perform a storm inspection and we deem that there was no damage or whatnot. We can put that in writing. So if your buyer needs that for their loan, or if your seller needs that to give some confidence to their listing, I think that's a really useful tool. And then I'm also not sure on the status of FEMA right now, but we were allowed to be a representative for FEMA inspections. So I'm not sure if you guys know, but someone does have to be present while FEMA is there. And some people may be displaced or not comfortable with that. So we can represent home buyers on those interactions. So if that's helpful to anyone, happy to serve in that way. And lastly, I'm putting this blog out today, so I'll share it on social media, but I put together this not so obvious post-storm inspection checklist. So check your crawl space and attics, and you're like, no duh, Kimmy, that's the first thing we did. But that's where we're seeing a lot of this residual damage. Door and window function, if you're having trouble opening or closing doors, it could be a structural defect indication. Checking roofs and gutters, like I said, actually getting somebody on top of your roof to see the quality of the roof. Mold and water contamination, I know that's on everyone's agenda. Make sure you're getting those tested. If not, with a free resource, we'd be happy to do it. Septic systems, if your exterior was flooded or had a substantial amount of water, you may want to get that checked out because they can become oversaturated and impede the function. Observing new stains and smells. And the last one was inspired by that client I just mentioned. Unfortunately, I think they had that erosion happen after the storm. So really important to check the landscaping integrity, retaining walls, erosion, trees, making sure trees are in a safe place. So feel free to scan this QR code. It's going to take you to a Google Doc. It's actually an email script. If you guys want to reach out to your clients and say, hey, just checking in, want to see how you're doing, make sure you're checking up on all these things. I've included that, and you can also offer them the discount for the package. So I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully I kept that within my few-minute allotment. For who was pictured next to me? Was that you, Sabrina? Sabrina. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina West. She's got some awesome lending tips and tricks to go over.
All right. I'm going to give Kimmy a shout out to her why it's so important to do this, though, because we thought we in my personal home was unscathed, and well, there was water intrusion in the crawl space, but without climate control for 19 days, it has curled and buckled all of my hardwood floors. So this is why you should do it with your sellers. So that's my little plug for you. Give me just a second. And on to the fun stuff, because I know you love to talk here about finance. If I can share this. I can share. Here we go. All right, I'm just going to run quickly through some of this. So the big questions, I want to hit the big questions that I get right now. And a lot of it's based upon forbearance. Should I file for forbearance? What is forbearance? So lenders, technically by law, like whenever you're in a disaster area, they are to offer forbearance. My advice to most people is just because you're offered forbearance doesn't mean you should always take it. There are repercussions to it. It's a very individual process. And then the other big thing is, will it hurt my credit? Technically, your lender will put on your credit report that you were in forbearance. We all came out of COVID, forbearance were given. A lot of people took it thinking it was free money, and there's multiple types, okay? So there's ones that, your interest is still accruing, or it waives the interest, or it gets tacked onto the end of your loan. So you want to specifically talk to your particular lender on that. So here's some just things to remember, right? So one, are you eligible? If you were in a FEMA disaster area, you are eligible for forbearance with your mortgage loan. The length of forbearance can change depending on the lender. Most of the time it's about 90 days. They can extend it for longer. And does interest accrue? Most of the time interest still does accrue on your loan. Make sure that you contact your specific lender and ask and read the fine print. If you don't read the fine print, it can kind of catch up to you. A lot of times they'll do no payments for 90 days, but as soon as that next payments, they want all of those payments at once. So you want to make sure you're asking the right questions and looking specifically at the fine print. You can move into a modification after a long, typically about a year. Like I said, it depends on your particular situation. Forbearance is there for people to use it that really got affected. But if you're able to continue to make your payment, my advice to you is we're in a lot of people who bought that have higher interest rates. If you remember during COVID, people were in forbearance. You have to come out of forbearance, and most of the time there is a waiting period of on-time payments that have to be fully rectified before. Sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's 12 months. It just doesn't give you as many options. So you want to make sure that you're having that conversation. Feel free to give me a call if you want me to look at your specific before you actually go into forbearance to decide whether or not it's a good option for you. The big other question I get is your loan going to be forgiven? Unfortunately, even if the house is gone, it doesn't mean the loans are going to be forgiven. So there are a couple of different steps. They can, a lot of times you will see that later, a year, 2 years after. Sometimes you will see that people have their mortgages forgiven, but that's typically when the government steps in and says, we're going to give a tax incentive for you to forgive, or these particular loans that were in a disaster area. So do not assume that it will, because unfortunately it doesn't always happen. Let's see if we'll come back to rates. I know that's what y'all want. So the big thing that I would tell you is on the forbearance is the number one question I get right now. There are people who really need it, right? And it does, when things are not paid, mortgage companies still do need to run. So take it if it is a true hardship. I do not want to discourage anyone from taking it if it's a true hardship, but it will affect you. So just note that. And then the big question that I'm getting right now is, why did mortgage rates go up? So a lot of times what people don't realize is we, as lenders, we already knew that the Fed cut was going to happen. So when you started seeing those 6% rates and those lower rates a month and a half, 2 months, well, at this point, it's been 2.5 months ago, those basis points were already built in, those rate cuts were already built into our pricing. So people who wanted to wait just for the rate cut to see if we had any further drop, it obviously has kind of backfired. Okay. There's a lot of things that affect that. We had a strong job growth report in September, which has made rates increase. Plus you have, political items that start to affect rates as well. So everybody's asking me, what do we think rates are going to do? I do think that we still will have a little bit of a rate cut. Rates are back up anywhere, I would say, between, depending on 6.75 all the way to 7.125. And that's based upon your particular situation. So remember, the things that affect your people are down payment, credit score, types of loans, types of properties, all of those factors. So it's very specific on what your rates are going to be. So if we want to look at statistics, because I love statistics myself, the projection from the National Association of Home Builders for 2025 is we're expecting to go into the high fives. In 2026, they're thinking maybe they'll be between 4 and 5. Okay. Remember, these are projections, but that kind of gives you an idea of where we're going. I do think it's going to be a slow decline, right? And just it's a very individual process. So make sure that you're contacting the person that you trust. Look at your specific situation to determine, is it time to, buy now? It's always the time to buy now, because it's a very individual process, to be honest. And I guess, the big thing that I always try to express to people is, and I agree with Jeff and Zach, is get the data, educate yourself, and then come up with a plan for your clients. Because whether you're a consumer or a real estate professional, know the data. Don't go too much just off of what we feel, because we are in a high stress environment right now. We're taking on a lot of what our clients are going through. So make sure that you research the data, you really educate yourself, and reach out and find the people you trust to get that, and then make a plan. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
And this might be a longer answer, but maybe we can do part two. What about the FHA 203H loans?
Okay.
Are you doing those? And quickly, what are those?
Yeah, so those are, let me stop sharing this. So those are renovation loans, right? They have some different types of tax benefits and things of that sort. So the 203K loans are going to be any type of renovation loan. So if you do find people, I mean, I want to express, I'm going through this personally too. My parents lost their home. It was 5 feet underwater. So you go through all of those things of like filing the insurance, you don't have flood insurance, then it's denied, then you get FEMA, you don't know what's covered, you don't know, maybe they give you $100,000. So these loans are there, right? Obviously, we don't want people to be borrowing money just to rebuild the home they want, but it does happen. So these are available to do the 203Ks if you need to.
Love it. Appreciate it. Okay. I know we're crunched on time, but Catherine Van Marter, our wonderful resident real estate attorney. She's been an awesome resource. What are you seeing? How are you advising clients? How can we utilize your services to persevere?
Yeah, hey guys. Catherine Van Marter Law. It's really good to see all your faces. And I'm thinking of each and every one of you and everything that you guys are going through right now. This is a unique time to be alive and live in the Western North Carolina, and particularly to do our jobs. So if we can support you with that in any way, please let us know. So the first thing I want to say, and I'm going to be very brief on this because we're about to talk to the expert on the subject, but it is not the time to forget about your insurance. Like Kimmy was mentioning, if you find damage to your home or your clients find damage to their home, please file your insurance claims fast, file them accurately. If you have questions about what you should be putting on them, how you should be phrasing things, if you are not sure about how the damage was caused, things like that, talk to your competent and qualified insurance agent. I highly recommend Cat Shackles. Or talk to your attorney. Talk to an attorney. They can help you with that. Because at a certain point in time, like we've seen, federal funds are going to run out for things. So if you need access to those federal funds and your insurance declines your claim, you have a limited amount of time under which you can get those claims in and filed. It's not tomorrow, but we have a deadline at some point. So making sure that you find out what you need, what your clients need, so that they can recover from the events that we've experienced is incredibly important. I'm going to be super fast because I know we're out of time. I also want to remind everyone, I know that all of us attorneys are so annoying about this, but please practice caution in fraud in this time in particular. They're going to see a rise in people trying to communicate with you. You're in a state of panic. Your attorney's in a state of panic. Someone lost their house, right? That is the time where you are the most vulnerable to someone taking advantage of your situation, clicking on that stupid link in an email, sending a wire to the wrong place, things like that. Pay attention. Make your clients pay attention. If they can't do it, help them with it. Do it for them. You have to be paying attention right now. It's very, very important to protecting you and protecting your clients. Two other things I wanted to mention is I'm getting a lot of questions about resurveying properties where there are waterways or there have been substantial damage to either shared elements, roads, rights of way, things like that, right? We're going to see that. The answer is, should I get a survey? Yes, please get a survey. Figure out what is different. Think about that in the context of other legal agreements that you have, whether that's an easement, a right-of-way, a shared maintenance agreement with a neighbor. Those are all going to be questions that come up more and more, particularly as we see our market grow, and we are seeing it grow. I am seeing more contracts come in every day. I am seeing, more listing and pre-listing questions coming my way. So we will see things rebound, but those questions are going to come up. If you don't know, ask. Please ask. We're happy to help. You know, me, any other attorney in town that you work with is going to be happy to help answer those pre-listing questions to make sure that we don't end up with title issues when we're getting very close to closing. And we want to try and start the process of avoiding that now. So if you can be proactive about it, be proactive about it. And that includes thinking about damaged properties that's on a shared property line. I'm not going to give you an answer to whether your neighbor's crappy drainage system is something you can sue them over, because that's going to be a very individual question, right? But those are the questions that are going to need to be answered. And some of those can be answered through pre-existing agreements, whether that's an easement or right-of-way or a shared maintenance agreement. So ask the questions, ask them early, ask them on your client's behalf, and ask your clients when you're going to these, hopefully all of the millions of listing appointments that we'll have in the near future, you know, whether the near future is next month or 6 months, ask them those questions up front, right? Ask them if they need to make changes to certain elements of the agreements and legal documents they have on their property prior to listing it. We are going to see title issues come up. Additionally, if you have any court-ordered sales, anything like that that's happening right now, courts are opening back up for filings on Monday. Well, I guess I should say everything is due by Monday that was due during this period of time. So you'll see movement in the coming weeks with that, but everyone who has court-ordered sales, estate sales, things like that, is going to need to practice patience. The courts are going to be incredibly overwhelmed when they get all these filings coming. So be patient, be kind to the people around you. They're probably doing the best they can too. You know, like today we heard that they were going to upload a file for us to the new system, and their power was going in and out. So they were having a hard time getting it uploaded. So, you know, these are going to be the situations that we face. Practice kindness as much as you can in those situations and encourage your clients to do the same. Biggest question I've been getting asked is about paragraph 11 of our dear friend, the offer to purchase contract, where the property is not in the same or substantially the same condition as it was at the time of contract. Most of those problems are resolving themselves as we get closer or as we get further away from the event. But I do want to kind of make 2 points here, because we are still getting questions about it. One, it says that you can either get your due diligence and earnest money back, or you can and terminate, or you are entitled to the insurance proceeds of the claim. So if your client does not want to wait for insurance, they want to close on the property, there are ways to work that. Work with your attorney, make sure that they are aware of what's happening, make sure that they're aware of the scope of damages. Wait until they figure out how much they're going to get from their insurance. That's what I would recommend. But that's a personal decision that people are making in their own ways. You know, do the best that you can to protect either your buyer or seller clients. And I'm going to say this statement, and you can see probably the implications one way or another. But is the property in the same or substantially the same condition is in and of itself a somewhat subjective question, where there's minimal damage to the property. So a buyer simply claiming that the property is not in the same or substantially the same condition, unless there's only been a little bit of damage to that property, does not mean that that seller is going to agree with you and necessarily give you that due diligence back. So on the buyer side, extend that due diligence if you can. Protect that earnest money, right? That is what protects that earnest money, is having that extended due diligence date. On the seller side, you might want to look at maybe not extending that due diligence date as far as you can if there's been minimal damage to the property. It just depends on what your seller and your buyer would like to do. But take into consideration that that is indeed a subjective criteria. So where there is not agreement on the damage and the scope of how to handle it, and there's the seller's not willing to return these deposits, or particularly the due diligence deposit, you are looking at something that could lead to litigation situations. So the better we can do to protect our clients and protect ourselves in those situations, let's do it. Ask questions. And I think that's all I've got, but I'm sure you guys might have questions for me, so feel free to throw them at me. Or you can also always email me, and I'll put that in the chat if you have a question particular to a situation that you're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think for the sake of time, we're going to roll to Kat. Anyone who can hang out after, please do. But like Catherine just volunteered, please contact any of us if you have any particular questions, because I'm sure each individual situation has a different answer. So without further ado, our final grand finale, Kat Shackles of Brink Insurance out of Weaverville, North Carolina, is here to do the same thing we've all been doing, answer our frequently asked questions about insurance and how we can help you guys. Kat.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you all, and thanks for sticking around a few more minutes to talk about the exciting world of insurance. I know we're all geared up and pumped up, baby. All right, so as you know, recently a hurricane took a hike in the mountains, and what do we do know? Hurricanes don't go hiking in the mountains. So from an insurance perspective, we are all upside down. We are experiencing things that we have never experienced before that are completely unprecedented for this area, that even our greatest ancestors in 1916, for us natives of the area like myself, never saw anything like this. So first of all, I just want to say, pat yourselves on the back, because we're all going through something new and we're all doing it together. And if there's anywhere I want to do it, it's Asheville, North Carolina, with these people that have a better attitude, a better heart and spirit than anybody else I could ever know. So thanks to everybody here, because we're all in this thing together. We're going to stay in this thing together. So as you can see here, I have some numbers that I found for our estimated losses for what we anticipate could come from Hurricane Helene as a total. Again, this is going to be a total for the hurricane, so not necessarily limited to just Western North Carolina, but I think this is a really great image to sort of help put into perspective sort of what we are looking at here. If we go back historically, so if we go back to 2004, back to Ivan, that brought about 63 million in damages total, one of the bigger storms that we ever saw in this area. As you can see here, we're looking at anywhere from 30.5 billion to 47.5 billion. To put that in a small perspective for you, the total loss history for the industry from 2022, $22 billion. We're blowing through that in one singular event here. As you can see here, you're going to see some of the figures that include insured wind and flood subtotal. That's only coming to 10.5 billion of the 30.5 estimated billion. So we are going to be facing some challenges as an area, because insurance as an industry can only do so much. There has to be limitations on something, because to give unfettered coverage would come with really poor consequences, namely that none of us could afford it. But that is the very concept of insurance, is that we all put in a little so that none of us are out a lot. But what has been happening is that insurance is a proactive or a reactive industry. So it takes an event happening for us to make changes to know what to do going forward. It takes an event like 9/11 to happen for us to include verbiage about terrorism coverage. It takes an event like the bed bug outbreaks in hotels for us to include verbiage about that, COVID, communicable diseases, et cetera. So we will probably be seeing, modifications come after this. We're going to see changes in homeowners policies. We're going to see changes in business owners policies. We have this lovely saying of what the big print giveth, the fine print taketh away. And that's what some of us are learning right now in a really hard way. Sometimes insurance can be part of the transactional piece of a closing, of a sale, of a real estate transaction. And so in the future, something that I would love for us to all think about is, how do we make this a more meaningful part of things? How do we make this not just a hurdle that we have to jump over, but how do we make this meaningful for our clients and for ourselves and for each other? Because again, we are in the industry of protecting people, but also it is a private industry. These are companies that also have goals, for financial stability themselves. And so there's going to be a mix of, how do we help? How do we restore? Where do the limits come into the play? And how do we make changes going forward? So one of the best ways that we can do that is through our legislator, through our voting, through our changes. So in North Carolina and other states, every other state, we are all individually regulated on a state-to-state basis. So working with folks on a local, state, and federal level to be able to make insurance changes is how things actually happen. I can only tell you from my experience of working with a Fortune 100 insurance company that things don't necessarily move fast in those arenas. And so the more we can vocalize and voice what we need as individuals, as policyholders, and as professionals, the faster things can move along in the arena to come for some change. Certainly right now, I see and hear huge feedback on loss of rents for rental income properties, business interruptions for individuals and for businesses, you know, and depending on where and how things lie, what the cause of loss is, why the home can't be accessed, or, you know, what the utility situation is, you know, there's lots of ins and outs and stuff. And so having a local insurance professional that you can call and talk to about these things is going to become more and more of an asset. As we already have seen, it is always better to be doing business with a human. But in times like this, we can't replace some of the things that we have lost. We certainly can never overlook or replace any of the lives that were lost here, but we are here to help people recover financially and sometimes do even more as an industry and as local people. And so that's something that I feel really great about within my industry, and especially within my agency, is that every step we have taken to get to this day, I feel like I'm in the Super Bowl right now. Like, now is our time to shine. Now, like, this is what we are here for. And it stresses me out, but it doesn't stress me out in a lot of ways, because we've taken the actions along the way to help people to know that when times come, when things are uncertain, there is going to be some sort of backing there. I always sort of say this, you know, as a joking piece, but the only thing more disappointing than paying for insurance is paying for insurance that doesn't do anything. Let's work together to try to understand these forms, to try to understand these policies, because we kind of got here in this unbelievably bad combination of things happening at once. You take the last couple of years of economic uncertainty, you take climate change, you take inflation, you take population migration, and then you throw in a hurricane hiking in the mountains, and we're upside down, to say the least. So in the future, you know, if I had to give a quick and brief outlook of what I think might happen, we're going to see some changes in policy forms. We're definitely going to see increased rates, because certainly things just aren't adequate to be paying for the losses that we're currently facing. And more, I know that we have to work together as local professionals to be able to educate people. You know, we are here to help each other, and I am here to help you first and foremost when it comes to insurance. So please, any questions you have about, hey, X, Y, or Z is going on, I don't know how this is going to respond. Hey, I have a closing coming up, but there's still damages on the home. What do we do? I have a seller who needs to know how much of this they need to repair or how much they can put onto somebody else. Let's talk about these things. I am here to be a local partner and resource to everyone that I know. Anything that pertains to insurance, or if you can imagine that I might have an interest in it, I do. It really is something that I get excited about, and you need somebody that's excited. I don't know if you've talked to anybody on a 1-800 number recently, whether it's FEMA or DSNAP or your insurance or anybody. It's not a great experience. Come talk to me. I'll make it a good experience. I can help you, is what I'm trying to say.
I can vouch for that. If any of you were at our last trivia, Kat regaled us with Girl Scout singing songs. I think this is why I've aligned myself with these wonderful ladies, and Zach and Jeff as well. Is like, we're in it together. We're really invested in doing this together, but also, like, worrying only steals today's joy, right? How can we do this with a positive attitude and be a team and do it in a positive way, you know, in spite of, or in lieu of the disaster. So I know there's still quite a few people on here. I want to thank all the participants. But I personally am going to hang out. I'd like to open it up to questions. If anyone has to jump off, please feel free. This is going to be recorded as well. But does anyone on there have any questions for Sabrina, Catherine, Kat, or myself? Or just anything to say? So quiet, everybody. Annie, I appreciate your sentiment. I agree. I think the more conversations I have, the more optimistic I feel about everything. And I think that was the purpose of today, was just having that conversation so we can all have a little bit of normalcy in our business.
I have a cat question.
Yes, please.
For people that aren't in a floodplain, that aren't required to have flood insurance, is flood insurance outside of a floodplain, like adding that to your traditional insurance policy, super expensive? Or is it like not a huge add-on?
Great question. So certainly there are companies now that are coming out with offerings that can be an endorsement to your normal homeowner's policy if you're not in a flood zone. Certainly there are companies that help with excess flood. So if you are in a flood zone, but perhaps the $250,000 through the NFIP is not enough for the structure, there are companies that cover the excess layer above that. Certainly, looking at a flood policy now that we know that it can include some earth movement, landslide, things like that. Certainly, you know, I think that becomes a huge talking point for folks that are in steeper areas, more remote areas. You know, it's going to become certainly more strategic than it ever was in the past to be able to help folks understand the importance of flood coverage and how it can respond.
Thank you.
You,
Well,
Gina,
that's one question. It's gonna be a hard question. Like, is it like $500 more a year or $1,000 more a year? I know it depends on the person and the house, but like if you weren't in a danger zone, like you weren't on a floodplain and you weren't in like a slope movement area that's like mapped or anything like that.
Sure, certainly hard to put a ballpark figure on it in a situation like this, but perhaps less prohibitively expensive than what we might have told ourselves in the past. Certainly, if it is on your mind, I think a great way to start would be to call a local insurance professional or your agent that you love to work with and say, hey, listen, I'm interested in flood. Tell me what you know about it. And if they are excited to talk to you about it, if they have some good information for you on it, if they can quickly and easily get back to you with a quote with it, they should be able to help you through that. And if not, I can certainly do that at my office and would love to help you with that as well. But let's talk about flood. Like I said, there are endorsements from your homeowners that can be as little as $40, $60, $100 a year that can cover some inland flood coverage. There can be full-blown flood policies, excess flood policies, lots of ways to come up with the coverage.
Thank you.
thank you,
So
Asha.
yes, sorry, Asha, I know that was not as direct as we wanted.
It was good. I like that.
Very political answer. The answering without answering. I'm just kidding. No, that was
Yeah, that's
awesome.
the insurance agency answer.
Yeah, Kat, Gina asked, what about the cost for insurance for landslides / earthquakes? What is the coverage there?
Right, so good questions there. Again, generally, can be extended through your policy for less than you think. One thing that I want to touch on and that pertains to earthquake and some of these, et cetera, is that you might see now and in the future differing deductibles for these type of things. Certainly at the coast, a lot of times we see wind hail excluded. We see larger deductibles for wind hail. In Florida, you're going to see named storm deductibles, things like that. And so in the future of insurance, you know, I think we will begin to see more of that in Western North Carolina too, when that has not necessarily been a thing. But certainly, I think looking into these and researching these things, you might be pleasantly surprised that they are far more affordable than we ever thought.
Good to know. And then somebody asked for the attachments for all of the presenters. I'm going to give you guys the attendee list. So Sabrina, if you could share your slides, Kat, if you can share your slides, that was specifically requested. And someone asked for Jeff's graphics. So I'll make sure to get Jeff's graphics so that you guys can use those as well. Any other questions? Sabrina.
I just dropped the PDF. It's a PDF, so it's already in the chat if anyone wants to grab it.
Someone said, because I'm using Otter AI to like do something, that it's making them go through Otter AI to get the attachments. So we'll email them again just in case, or you can figure out AI to get them out of the chat.
Okay.
Any other questions or we have presumably 30 or 26 agents on here. Do any of you have any questions for each other? Like any specific stuff you guys want to brainstorm on? If not, feel free to jump off. Such a quiet group. I am going to share, hold on, and I'll email it too. I wanted to share, as promised, copy link, go back to chat. Just everyone in meeting. This is the event I'm going to be hosting on November 6th. It is going to be an in-person lunch and learn. I am gathering some broker owners to talk about how they're leading agents. I hope to have Zach back to share part 2 of his presentation. But if you're looking for some in-person community, please do register and join us there. I'm really excited for that. So thank you again, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Kelly, I see you waving. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jen.
you,
Stay
Kimmy.
safe in
Thanks for hosting
Florida.
us.
Great.
Absolutely.
Hold your heads up high. Good.
Extend.
Hey, by the way, that might come to North Carolina. If you have a listing here in Florida, the seller needs to sign a flooding insurance claim disclosure. If the home had ever been flooded, if you had ever claimed like compensation or something for the flooding. If you buy a home here and the seller had filed a claim but not had done any repair, the buyer of the home cannot insure the house.
Yeah, that's what I was curious as well. And Kat, you're still on. Like, I'm curious how previous claims, like insurability. I mean, like, are these homes
Yeah.
going to be
So it
able to
needs
be
to be
insured?
remedied.
So
Yeah.
certainly it can affect insurability. Certainly insurance companies, before they insure a home, want to make sure that previous damages have been repaired. So that is certainly not an uncommon question that we will hear around all of this as things are happening. And so I think maybe to a point that Catherine had, that certainly we sort of hope or to encourage folks to make and complete those repairs before the sale.
But the disclosure is not mandatory right now in North Carolina as on the seller side. Right?
Yeah,
But,
Not that I know of from a
but it's here.
claim.
It's new. It's just, everybody added that.
No, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's included as a part of the underwriting package from a lender,
Oh,
but
yeah?
it's not something that's required. It's very specific situations where particularly properties are in flood zones or flood areas, or they've experienced previous flood damage that was disclosed in some way to the lender. But it's largely an underwriting requirement for lenders more so than a statutory legal requirement.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I referenced with the letter. So for example, say there was a claim made that was denied, so they maybe privately made the repairs. Someone like a home inspector or general contractor may be asked to verify the repairs or speak to that the repairs were done or they were acceptable or there is no current damage, there's no current threat, stuff like that. So utilize vendors like ourselves if that's the case. If you need something verified, especially from a independent third party, you can't always just take the homeowner's word for it. They may need a third party to opine. So happy to help in those situations. And we're definitely seeing that now, more requests for certification, especially in this sensitive time window of there not being so much time since it's elapsed.
I think we're also going to continue to see that, as things sort of tighten up in the insurance realm as well. Some of my companies are already doing it, but any roofs, any home systems, plumbing, electrical, et cetera, they're going to ask for a contractor to put their name on it to say these systems are still in good shape if there haven't been any updates to those systems in the last 10 or 20 years. So we will probably continue to see more on that as well, Kimmy.
Yeah.
And remember that, you can't get to the closing table with a lender unless you have an insurance policy that satisfies their requirements. So, that's kind of step A is going to be getting that insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. So have those conversations early. Get your dream team. We're here for you.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Make sure everyone's working together and everybody's communicating. Definitely. Cool. Well, I'm appreciating all this community here. We're all just going to sit here for the rest of the day. I love it. We just need some company. I feel like it's COVID again, and we're all like, can we just hang out and like enjoy each other's company? All right. Well, it is about
Totally.
4:30. I am going to conclude the recording so we don't bore everyone to death. But so I'm going to end the meeting. But thank you guys so much, everyone, for your time, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Thank you
Have a good
again.
night.
Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
Take care, everyone.